Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to continue our study of the book of Nehemiah. We will study chapter 7. Chapter 7 is very long, but also not very exciting, especially in comparison to the last few chapters. We are still in the middle of the difficulties that Nehemiah had with the troublemakers who were trying to subvert his efforts and stop him from being successful in building the walls of Jerusalem and building the city of Jerusalem. Here we are going to, a lot of this is going to be just a list of names and families, etc., which I will read through, but I will read through it very quickly. I apologize if it's not the most exciting. One of the points that Nehemiah is going to be getting across is that once he built the city, he realized that they had a serious population problem, which was that there is not enough people to populate the city. The people were scattered throughout the small towns and farms, etc., across the countryside. And the capital city, being, of course, that it wasn't exactly a safe, secure, bustling city at this time in history. It was a small, quite provincial place. The idea was to build it into the capital of the people, to make it into the capital of the people. And as part of Nehemiah's efforts to bring people back into the city, which we will touch on a little bit this chapter, but we will come back to it later in more detail, he first needed to get a tally of who's who and what's what. So that's what we're going to deal with in this chapter mostly. Vayehi, and it was. This is verse 1. Ka'asher nivneta hachoma, when the wall of the city was completely built, va'amid hadlatot, and I completed placing the doors in the doorways. The city is now secure, ready to be locked. Vayipaktu hashoarim v'hamishorim v'alavim, and we appointed the gatekeepers. We appointed those that will sing upon the closing of the gates, and the Levites who were in charge of being the gatekeepers and the singers. And I commanded my brother Hanani. Here's where we see clearly that Hanani, who appeared earlier in the book of Nehemiah, was the brother who traveled all the way to the capital city of Persia, Shushan, in order to inform his brother of the sorry state of affairs in Jerusalem. We see that Hanani was clearly Nehemiah's actual genetic brother. Viat Hananya star Habira al Yishlayim, and Hananya, who was the chief of the Bira. The Bira is a tower or a fortress over Jerusalem, which was apparently built to overlook the city of Jerusalem. Kihu kiish emet, because he is a truthful man. He, in other words, Hanani and Hananya, or just Hananya, he's referring to at this point, was a truthful person, a person I could trust. If you recall in the last chapter, we learned that Nehemiah had to watch his back at every corner because there was always traitors and informers at every turn that tried to masquerade as his supporters, but tried to use subversion to ruin his efforts. So Nehemiah is saying, these people I trusted. He was more fearful of God than most people were. In other words, I knew he was a God-fearing man, he was a trustworthy man, I could trust him, and therefore I commanded him with the following instructions, and these are very important instructions. I told them, Lo yipatchu sha'arei Yerushalayim ad chom hashemesh, do not open the gates of Jerusalem until the sun is up in the sky. In other words, not with the crack of dawn, but when the sun is fully up. You know, during the time of darkness is the time when people are most vulnerable and when the enemy could most likely sneak in. So I want to make sure it's broad daylight, when the guards could watch, the lookouts can keep lookout. That's when you can open the doors of the city, v'adhem omdim. But yagifu ad lasos ve'achozu. And while you're still standing watch, that's when you have to close the doors. In other words, the guards that are watching the doors while it's open to guard against enemies from coming in, they need to be there all the way until the doors are shut and locked and sealed. ve'echozu, and they are barred shut. V'ha'amid mishmeros yoshvei Yerushalayim, and then we will establish watches, shifts of people to take watch. Those will be of the residents of the city Jerusalem, each b'mishmaro, each person within his group, each neged beso, each person watching opposite his house. So they will be divided up into the areas based on where people live, and they'll be responsible for the areas where they live. Here, now the city, now that we built all the walls, the entire city that was within the walls, Rachavat Yadayim Ugdola, was very broad and large. It was a big city. These walls were built upon the foundations of the old walls. In the old days, this was a capital city of Judea, Gedola. It was large, but the people within it were very small in number. And for the most part, the houses, the homes within the walls were not very built up. In other words, there weren't a lot of houses, there weren't a lot of people. Vayiten Elohai El Libi, and my God put it in my heart. God inspired me to do something about it. So I thought, now I need to take stock of who are the families that are here, who are the people that are here, how can I do something about the population of the city. So he had to first figure out, where are people from, which families are here, how can I bring some of them into the city. So again, I gathered the nobles and the people in charge, and the entire nation that were there, to figure out which families, people in those days lived within their clans, within their groups, within their family, their family areas. So I needed to figure out who are the families that are here, who are the people that belong to each family, and how can I get some of them to come back to the city. And I found Sefer Hayachas Ha'olim Barishona. I found the book in which it was recorded, the genealogy, in other words, the origins of the people who came the first time around. Remember, back about 70, 80 years prior to Nehemiah was the first groups of people coming back during the days of King Cyrus. Those were led by Zerubbabel, and we read about Zerubbabel. We read about him in the books of Haggai and Zechariah. We read about them in the earlier in the book of Ezra. And I found there, this was a good starting point. From here I can see who are the families that are here and how many people came with each one, and then we can trace the people that I have in front of me and figure this all out. These are the people that came from the province. Medina here probably means the provinces of Persia from which they came. That came from the captivity within exile, and they returned back here. Asher Hegla Nebuchadnezzar, these are the people who were exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Babel, the king of Babylon, by Yeshuva Yerushalayim. They returned to Jerusalem, Yehuda, and to Judea, Ish Leiro. Each person came back to their cities. Remember, we emphasized this when we studied this earlier, that the groups of people they had maintained their family ties and their memories of which towns they were from, and they went back to those towns. Haboim, these are the ones that came im Zerubbabel, with Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and Yeshua. Remember, those were the two main leaders back then. Zerubbabel was the political leader, Yeshua was the high priest. And then the following people, Nehemiah, Azariah, Raamya, Nachmani, Mordechai, Bilshan, Misperes, Bigvai, Nechum, Ba'ana, Mispar, Anshe Am Yisrael. The many of the people of Israel came under the leadership of the people that I just mentioned. This Nehemiah presumably was a different person by the name of Nehemiah. The Mordechai, the tradition has it that it was the same as the hero of the Purim story. However, chronologically it's difficult to make that work. So it may have been a different person by the name of Mordechai, but either way, These are the people that came. And who are they? And I'm going to read through the next 30, 40 verses pretty quickly. Bnei Parosh, the children of Parosh, Alpayim Me'avashivim Mishnayim were 2,702. Bnei Shvati, the children of Shvati, were Shlosh Me'os Shivim Mishnayim were 372. Bnei Arach, the children of Arach, or Sheish Me'os Chamishim Mishnayim were 652. Bnei Pachas Moab, the children of Pachat Moab, which literally means the governor of the Moab region, Livnei Yoshua, those that were the sons of Yeshua, V'Yoav, Alpayim Mushmona Me'os Shmona Asar, 2,818. Bnei Elam, the children of Elam, Elef Masayim Chamishim Yarba, were 1,254. Bnei Zatu, the children of Zatu, Shmona Me'os Abram V'Chamish, 845. Bnei Zakai, Shva Me'os V'Shishim, were 760. Bnei Vinoi, Sheish Me'os Abram Shmona, were 648. Bnei Bevai, Sheish Me'os Esrim Shmona, were 628. Bnei Asgod, Alpayim Shlosh Me'os Esrim Mishnayim, were 2,322. Bnei Adonikam, the children of Adonikam, were Sheish Me'os Shishim V'Shiva, were 667. Bnei Bigvai, Alpayim Shishim V'Shiva, the children of Bigvai, were 2,067. Bnei Adin, Sheish Me'os Chamishim V'Chamisha, the children of Adin, were 655. Bnei Ater, L'Chizkiah Tishim V'Shmona, the children of Ater, to the Chizkiah were the descendants, or a number of descendants, 98. Bnei Chusham, the children of Chusham, Shlosh Me'os Esrim U'Shmona, were 328. Bnei Veitzoi, Shlosh Me'os Esrim Yarba, were 324. Bnei Charif, Me'ash Nei Masar, were 112. Bnei Givon, Tishim V'Chamisha, were 95. Anshe Beit Lechem, the people that came from the town of Bethlehem, Unetofa, and the town of Netofa, Mea Shmona Mushmona, were 188. Anshe Anatot, the people of Anatot, city famous for being the birthplace and the hometown of the prophet Jeremiah. Mea Esr Mushmona, there was 128 of those. Anshe Beit Azmavet, the people that came from the town of Azmavet, Arbaim Mushnayim, were 42. Anshe Kiryat Ye'arim, people from Kiryat Ye'arim, Kefira, Uveirot, these are three towns that were near each other. Shvam Me'ot Yarbar Mushlosha, were 743. Anshe Harama, people that came from the town of Rama, Vigava, Sheish Me'ot Esrim Echad, 621. Anshe Michmas Me'av Esrim Mishnayim, or 122. Anshe Beit El, people from Beit El and Biha'oi and Oi, Mea Esrim Mishlosha, 123. Anshe Nevo, people from the town of Nevo, Acher, the other town named Nevo, because there were several towns named Nevo, Chamishim Mishlaim, there was 52 of them. Bnei Elam Acher, the people of the other town called Elam, because we already had a town called Elam. Elef Matayim Chamishim Avi Arba, 254. Bnei Charim, Shlosh Me'os V'Esrim, 320. Bnei Yerecho, the people from Jericho, Shlosh Me'os Arbaim Chamisha, 345. Bnei Lod, the people from the town of Lod, Chadid v'Ono, and Chadid and Ono, these are three towns that are near each other. We still know the locations of these today. And Ono was famous because that was the place where we just in the last chapter learned of the plot to attempt to lure Nehemiah out to Ono, which was a far-off village, in order to kill him, but Nehemiah didn't fall for the plot. Shva Me'os Esrim Mishnayim, the people that came from those towns were 721. Bnei Sina'ah, the people from Sina'ah, Shloshet Alafim Tsham Me'ot Shloshim, were 3,930. HaKohanim, and now of the priests, Bnei Yedaiah, those that were descendant of Yedaiah, Lebeis Yeshua, who were from the family of Yeshua. Yeshua being, of course, the famous high priest who was one of the early leaders of the return to Jerusalem. To Shamiel Shivim Ushlosha, there was 973. Bnei Imer, the sons of Imer, Elef Chamishim Ushnaim, was 1,052. Bnei Pashchor, Elef Masayim Yarbam V'Shiva, 1,247. Bnei Charim, Elef Shiva Asar, 1,017. Haleviim, of those that were Leviim, Bnei Yeshua, those that were descendants of Yeshua. This was an extremely common name, the name Yeshua. Lekadmiel, to those that came from Kadmiel, Bnei Lahodava, Shivim Barba, were 74. Hamishorim, those that were singers, who were Bnei Asaf, who were descendants of Asaf. Mea Arbaim Ushmona, there was 148. Hashoarim, of those that were the gatekeepers, Bnei Shalom, Bnei Oter, Bnei Talmon, Bnei Akub, Bnei Chatita, Bnei Shavai, Mea Shloshim Ushmona, there was 133. Hanetinim, Bnei Tzicha, Bnei Chasufa, Bnei Tabaos, of the Netinim were the servants of the Beit HaMikdash, also known as Givonim, which we had them before. These were their families. We just listed 3 names, and another 3 are, this is verse 47, B'nai Keros, B'nai Seyah, B'nai Fadon, B'nai Levanah, B'nai Chagavah, B'nai Shalmoi, B'nai Chanan, B'nai Gidel, B'nai Gocher, B'nai Ra'aya, B'nai Ritzin, B'nai Nekoda, B'nai Gazon, B'nai Uzah, B'nai Fasach, B'nai Vesai, B'nai Meunim, B'nai Nefishtim. These are B'nai Bakbuk, B'nai Chakufa, B'nai Charchor, B'nai Vatzlit, B'nai Mechida, B'nai Charsha, B'nai Barkos, B'nai Sisra, B'nai Tomach, B'nai Netziach, B'nai Chatifa, B'nai... So these were all the families of the Netinim. There were many of these families, B'nai Abdei Shlomo, those that were sons of the servants of Shlomo. They lineage led back to servants of Shlomo. These were their family names: Bnei Sotai, Bnei Soferet, Bnei Ferida, Bnei Ya'la, Bnei Darkon, Bnei Gidel, Bnei Shvata, Bnei Chatil, Bnei Pocheret, Hatziviyim, Bnei Amon. Pocheret, Hatzvoyim, Bnei Amon. Kol HaNetinim. And of all of these families, when you add them all together, with Uvnei Avdei Shlomo, and add them with those that descended from the servants of King Solomon, all added up to 392. Ve'ela ha'olam mitel melach, and these were the people that came back, and they were originally from the town of Tel Melach, Tel Charsha, Kruv Adon ve'imer. This is the list of 4 different towns. V'lo yachlu lahagid beit avotam. They were not able to figure out exactly what families they came from. V'zaram im Yisraelim. It wasn't clear if they were originally of Jewish lineage. They may not have been. They weren't sure what their origins were. What were these families' names? B'nai Delaya, B'nai Tovia, B'nai Nekoda. These were 3 families, Sheish Meot Arba Mishnayim, 642. These people had clearly attached themselves to the Jewish people, but it wasn't clear that they were originally Judean or not. And we'll see soon why that may or may not matter. And from the priests, B'nai Chavaya, B'nai Akotz, B'nai Barzilai, Asher Lokach mi B'nos Barzilai Hagiladi Isha Vayikari Hashemam. From the priests, they had these following families that we just listed, and some of them were called the Bnei Barzilai, who were called Barzilai because they were descendants of those that had married the daughters of Barzilai. So it was the matrilineal name that this family had maintained after the generations. Ela Bikshuk Savam and Misyachsim. All of these people searched for evidence that showing where their origins, their genetic origins were from Valonim, so they could not find it. Therefore, Vayegoalu min hakuhuna, they were disqualified from being considered Kohen and from being considered priests. This is why it was important to define what their lineage was, because only someone who was born a Kohen can have the privileges that go to a Kohen. So Vayomer Hatir Shota Lahem. So Hatir Shota is a person's name. Who exactly is Hatir Shota is not exactly clear. But according to the tradition, Hatir Shota is Nehemiah. Just another name for Nehemiah. So, but otherwise, he instructed these Kohanim, these priests, who weren't sure if they actually were priests, Asher lo yochlu mikodesh hakadoshim ad amod hakohen leurim v'tumim, that because we could not determine whether or not they truly were Kohanim, they should not eat from the holy offerings, the holy sacrifices, because those are permitted only to a priest, until one day when we can reestablish the high priest within Urim v'Tumim. Those are the choshen, the breastplate that the Kohen wore, and the special names that were written behind the stones of the choshen. And the choshen was able to, through the Ruach HaKodesh, through the Holy Spirit of God, would be able to answer the question as to whether or not these people were truly Kohanim or not. So until we reestablish that, Nehemiah said, remember, the Beit HaMikdash has been on more or less standing, at least from the time that the Mizbeach was established now for 80 years. The Urim V'Tumim was not yet established, but Nehemiah was hoping that soon it will be, and then we'll know for sure whether you're Kohanim or not. Kol HaKol Ke'echad, the entire nation as one, Arba Ribo, was 42,000, Shlosh Meos V'Shishim 360. These were the lists of the people that came. Remember, those were generations prior, so by now there was even more, right? Milvad, this does not include Avdehem v'Am Hosehem, their male and female servants, Eila Shivat Alafim, those added up to another 7,000, Shlosh Meot Shloshim V'Shiva 337. V'lahem Mishorim Mishoros, and among them were men and women that were singers, that were another Masayim V'Arboim Chamisha, another 245 people. And then they had brought with them also a large number of animals, and again, we read this prior in the book of Ezra, but here it is again, verse 68, Gimalim Arba Meos Shloshim Chamisha, 435 camels, Chamorim, donkeys were Sheishat Alafim, 6,000 Shvamiot B'Yasrim, 720, Umiktsas Roshei Avos, and some of the heads of the families had made special donations. Nasnu Amanacha, they donated to the work of the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Who are these people? Hatir Shata, Nasan La'otzar Zav, the Hatir Shata, the same one we mentioned before, gave to the treasury Darkimonim, Elef Mizrakos Chamishim, 1,000 golden drachmas, which was a Persian coin, and 50 mizrakot, basins of that were meant to pour the blood onto the altar, kasnos, kohanim, and special robes, which were very, very valuable for the priests. 530. Umeirasheha avot, and from the heads of the other families, also nasnu l'otzar hamalacha, they gave a total to the treasury to help do the work. Zohav darkimonim shtei ribos, 20,000 gold drachmas. It's a huge amount of gold. V'chesef monim alpayim wasayim. You can go to many museums today and see a gold drachma from the Persian kingdom. Archaeologists have found many of them. And you can imagine 20,000 such coins. It must have been an incredibly large sum of money. V'asher nasnu she'eris ha'am, and the rest of the nation donated even more. Zahav darkamonim shtei ribo, another 20,000 golden drachmas. V'chesef manim alpayim, and 2,000 pieces of silver. V'kosnos kohanim shishim v'shiva, and cloaks for the kohanim, another 67. Vayeshu HaKohanim v'Alavim Yashorim Yamishorim Minami Anasinim B'Chol Yisrael Ba'arehem, and all of the people went and back to live in their cities, remember, but not as nearly as much in Jerusalem itself. Vayigah HaChodesh HaShvi U'Vnei Yisrael Ba'arehem, and the seventh month, the famous seventh month of Tishrei arrived. The month of Tishrei, the month of Rosh Hashanah, the month of Yom Kippur, the month of Yom Sukkot. And we're going to learn what happened in that month shortly in the next chapter. This concludes chapter 7, Nehemiah's census, which he started by going back a couple of years and seeing how many people had come and clearing up which families were which and who was who. And next, we are going to change tone a bit. We're not going to discuss the building of the walls. We're going to discuss the teaching of the Torah, the teaching of Torah to the people, teaching them after coming out of exile, after unfortunately living through the terrible destruction of the first temple, which was a result of the people's sins and their not knowing, and they're not living the way they were supposed to live. We're about to learn how they are going to be taught the Torah, and they are going to hopefully learn the message to live properly during this new opportunity to serve God properly. So that's what we are going to be studying when we start chapter 8. Thank you so much for studying chapter 7 together, and looking forward to studying chapter 8 and of course the rest of this beautiful book together.